Well, we like to acknowledge and celebrate all faith traditions here at Unity of Tucson, and we have adopted a ceremony here to do just that, called Lighting the Flames of Faith. It is guided each week by our keepers of the flames, and so to guide us this week, will you welcome this week's keepers of the flames, Laura Cass and my mother, Lynn Peterson.
Take a breath. Centering. We light a candle for the Tao, which teaches the purpose of life is inner harmony, peace, and longevity, achieved by living in accordance with the Tao. We light a candle for the shamanic traditions, which teaches that through a close relationship with the natural world, one gains guidance, support, and wisdom to live their best life. We light a candle for Hinduism, which teaches that we are able to escape bondage, ignorance, and a state of illusion through multiple experiences of life. Each life leads us closer to enlightenment. We light a candle for Judaism, which teaches the highest calling is to obey the commandments of God and to live ethically according to law. We light a candle for all forms of Buddhism, which teaches the purpose of life is to avoid suffering and gain enlightenment. We light a candle for all forms of Christianity, which teaches salvation from sin through the faith in Christ, through sacraments, and through good works. We light a candle for all forms of Islam, which teaches that through surrender to the will of God, one will gain paradise. We light a candle for the universalistic religion of Baha'i, which teaches that the soul is eternal and essentially good, and that the purpose of life is to develop spiritually and draw closer to God. We light a candle for all forms of New Thought, which teaches the divinity of all creation, the supremacy of thought over matter, and that through a law of cause and effect, one creates the circumstances of their life. We light a candle for all those who are as yet unaware of the power and presence of Spirit in their lives, and for the space that we are holding for them, and for all faith traditions unnamed in this ceremony. The final candle is the healing candle. It represents the revealing of the divinity at the core of all experience. This is your candle for whatever is in your mind and heart that requires the light.
Autographs in the classroom.
We also have a picture of them standing around you.
Yeah.
With pieces of paper in their hand.
Yeah, they're all holding up their piece of paper with my autograph and the picture that we took. Okay. Let's go back to our regularly scheduled program. Just taking this opportunity to acknowledge the peace candle as we do each week as a reminder that peace candle is consistently illuminated. It never goes out, and we choose to keep it consistently illuminated as a reflection of peace within our hearts. And that peace within each and every one of us is consistently illuminated as well. And so as we allow our infinite peace to inform every action, every relationship, every part of our experience, then right where we are creating a more peaceful world. So let us honor that by sharing together this prayer for world peace. Divine love indwells each person and radiates from one to another. Harmony is established and peace reigns in the world. And I wanted it to be I wanted her to sing it on this particular Sunday because there's a thing that's happened in Tucson this year that has a little bit of a direct bearing on my life. So this was supposed to be Pride weekend in Tucson. Yeah, and Pride was unexpectedly canceled not that long ago, and the organization that ran the Pride festivals for nearly 50 years basically folded. And so there's a bit of an unknown of what's going to happen in Tucson over the course of the future in terms of Pride. And it's an interesting time. I endeavored to try to not talk about political things, but it's an interesting time politically for the relationship of the LGBT community with, the structures that exist in this country. And so I wanted this Sunday to be ostensibly about pride and about understanding pride from a personal point of view. I came out of the closet, how old am I now? In 1991. And I was 18 years old, and I went to my first Pride celebration on Hippie Hill in Himmel Park. And for me, it was an enormous day because there were like hundreds of people there. And it was pretty remarkable for me. I want to define this word pride, though, because I think sometimes we get it a little misconstrued. There are multiple definitions of pride, and the one that really resonates with me in this context is this: a consciousness of one's own dignity. And I think that every single one of us can live life from a prideful point of view if we are acknowledging a consciousness of one's own dignity. Our self-esteem, it is self-esteem, y'all. It is not bloated arrogance or gratification from any of our external achievements. It's about knowing the truth of our being and celebrating that. And so, yes, this week was supposed to be a celebration for the LGBTQIA community, and we sent the message out on Friday that acknowledged what the talk title was going to be today, and the talk title was this: LGBT. And somebody said, well, what about the rest of the letters? I said, trust me, it's going to work. LGBT, an unexpected initialism. And people in the office were, what is the unexpected initialism going to be? Everybody's asking me, and I said, you'll find out. You'll find out. Because our mind probably, because we live in a culture, our mind probably likely fills in some familiar words there, right? We hear LGBT, we think of a particular community. But today I really want us to consider an alternative meaning, a different meaning, and something that we can live loudly and proudly. So, before we get to the unexpected initialism, I want to acknowledge that this month has been a celebration of presence. That's been the theme of the month. And on the real life service on Wednesday night, Reverend William offered some insight. And the minute he said this, I kind of took some notes about it, and it made me think about, some ways that I maybe have been approaching this concept of presence. And what he said is, sometimes we talk about presence in comparison with external circumstances, with the external world, with our circumstantial life, right? That we're always in a relational experience with the circumstances of our life, and we call that presence. But what we really mean when we are talking about presence in the context that we've been discussing this entire month is that it is practicing deep awareness of self from a spiritual point of view. It's very much inward looking, right? And that inward looking presencing allows us to live outwardly as the presence. Fundamentally, we've been talking all month about that third aspect of our mission statement: remember who you are. Remember who you are. And there's kind of a weird thing that happens when I say remember who you are, because a lot of times what may happen is in endeavoring to remember who we are, we start to align ourselves with those outside circumstances, because that's the way we identify ourselves initially, right? And what I'm saying is, let us take it deeper to turn the attention to the inner life, to turn the attention within, and remember at the core of our being, we are one thing, and that is God essence, God presence, that we are God. Because there can be nothing separate from the infinite. There can be nothing separate from the infinite. Think about that. You cannot be separate. You just can't. It's impossible. But boy, we do a good job of trying to make ourselves separate, right? The thing about presence also is that to acknowledge our divine presence, it's not a performative thing. It's not about going out there and saying, I am the presence of the divine. Look at me, how present I am. It's not perform. I mean, some people may enjoy that. I like to acknowledge that presencing for me is living in honest awareness, or the desire for honest awareness. Some of us are not there yet. But to live from an honest awareness of that idea of being. And just allowing it to show up, not forcing. We don't need to force anything. We just need to show up as the presence of love, as the presence of light, as the presence of life itself. And when we do that, what I think ends up happening is we end up experiencing more kindness because we're expressing more kindness. One of my favorite tenets of this philosophy is to say, if you want more love in your life, be the cause for someone else's loving. If you want more joy in your life, be the cause for someone else's joy. We don't derive those things from outside. We express ourselves and expose ourselves as those things, and then they are reflected back to us. So presence is an acknowledgement. Presence can be an acknowledgement of here's what I feel, truly. Here's what I think, truly. Here's what I need, truly. Here's what I fear, truly. And it's about not endeavoring to solicit sympathy, but rather connecting. Connecting. Truly connecting. I want us all to take just a moment because I'm having a moment, so I want us all to have a moment as well. Just take a look at your neighbor. What you see next to you and all around you is the presence of God. What if we never forgot that? Like ever. I don't go to Starbucks anymore. I know that shocks a lot of people. I haven't been to Starbucks in like 6 months. Remember, I used to be so famous for like all of my Starbucks and my coffee intake and everything. No more. Anyway, that's total side note. But imagine you go to your favorite coffee shop or the grocery store or the gas station or wherever you go in your everyday life, and you acknowledge, even if it's just an internal acknowledgement, that every single person you are seeing is the presence of God. What might life be? How might life be different from that point of view? Because here's the truth, the spiritual truth for me. Presence begins within. It's an acknowledgement of that divine identity. And as we acknowledge our own divine identity, then I think it is important that we acknowledge it for every single person we encounter. It is beyond the relative identity of the roles we play in each other's lives. It's beyond any affiliations. It is beyond any stories. There is something deeper. Because here's the thing about relative identity. Relative identity is, here's an identity. I am a married person. That's a relative identity. It is not the infinite truth of my being. There may be people out here who identify as divorced people. There may be people who are students, and that's part of their relative identity. There may be people who were, the youngest sibling, and then a new baby came along, and they're no longer the youngest sibling, right? And so these are all relative identities, but they change because you can go from being married to being divorced. You can go from being divorced to being married. You can go from single to being married. You can go from being a student to being a graduate. You can go from being the baby of the family to not being the baby of the family. That's a challenge for some people. Relative identity is malleable, it changes, but absolute reality never changes. It never changes. So absolute reality, the unchanging truth of our being, it is what we sometimes refer to as the I am identity, right? And when we speak about the I am identity in spiritual circles and New Thought, we try to utilize words. Well, if you're in my Tuesday night prayer class, you know that one of the things I've said frequently is language is great. It's a tool that we have, but it's not a great tool because it's limited. The moment we put words to something, we have now limited it. So just trying to say, I am spirit, we bring to mind some idea of what spirit is. And it is beyond the limited idea, the absolute identity that I'm talking about. So I can be spirit, I can be divine life, I can be the essence of all that is, I can be the creative source flowing forth into expression here and now, and it is still limited, that infinite identity that we all are. And when we have trouble with that, and we limit it, or if we forget to sense our absolute identity, then what we do is we cling to a relative identity, and that's where fear starts creating. When we cling to a relative identity, we start creating fear in our lives because all of a sudden we start to other. And we create weapons out of labels. The more we other, the more we become the other. Othering diminishes compassion. Othering fractures that sense of infinite presence because we can't be present fully when we are building and protecting an identity fortress. You can't be present within that. So part of what I'm inviting us all to do is to begin to break down the barriers that we have created in our lives of othering. It's a scary proposition for some people. This othering, it happens, and I want to be really clear, this othering happens for all of us. We all do it because a lot of it happens below the level of awareness. And so what I want to be really clear on is that this is not about shame. It's about waking to the awareness of something that we might be doing in our lives. And to know that we have a responsibility to do something about it. And the responsibility is to say, I can let go of the past, and I know that in this moment, I can endeavor to do and be something new. So this is not, I'm not endeavoring to call anyone out. But inviting us all to begin to notice what might be running in the background. What are the thoughts that you would never say out loud? I'm grateful that you would never say them out loud, but perhaps we start to address those thoughts within and say, why do I even have this thought? Start to question the thought itself, to endeavor to do something else, to think something else, to believe something else. One of the things that's happened to me here in this community is that one of the things that I do is I pretty freely refer to having a husband, which then everyone has a particularized idea of my identity, right? By just mentioning that I have a husband. And subsequently, I have been asked by some people to stop being so gay. But here's the question that comes to mind for me, and I have asked this of people who have said that very thing to me. said, if I mentioned a wife, would you have ever given it a second thought? Just something to think about. Because it is my desire that we live what we teach to be unapologetically inclusive. Here's the thing. That very question, that's othering, and it happens below the level of awareness. We don't even realize that we're doing it. That's how bias shows up. Bias shows up everywhere. Sometimes loudly, sometimes subtly. And we all, none of us are excused from this. We all have biases. It says unapologetically inclusive. I know it's maybe hard to say. I see somebody going, it says unapologetically inclusive. Right? None of us are exempt from bias. So our work, and this is something I endeavor to do in every single moment of my life, our work then is to notice those biases, to root them out, and to address them so that our infinite divine presence expresses in a more loving, honest, and free way. Letting go of those limited ideas of who we think people are or should be. Here's the thing about presencing. It's also not about just being nice. Presence is about being awake. It's about being aware. And so, what if the easiest way to address this was to be more kind? Just endeavor to be more kind. Take a moment to open up in awareness to the things you might be saying. Kindness is a discipline of presence. It's a decision to awaken to the humanity that exists in front of you in every interaction. In 1937, there was a book that was published. I remember being very drawn to this book as a kid, and then there was an animated film based on this book that I remember watching a lot, called The Hobbit, written by J.R.R. Tolkien. And in this, Tolkien had this to offer. Some believe it is only great power that can hold evil in check. But that is not what I have found. It's the small, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay, small acts of kindness and love. Presence doesn't need to roar. Just show up consistently in small acts, in the way we choose to engage. There was a minister and a theologian, a mystic and a civil rights leader named Howard Thurman. He co-founded the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples in San Francisco in 1944, and that was widely described as the first major interracial, interdenominational church in the United States. And his spiritual approach was not unlike ours. It was an opportunity to endeavor to look within, pointing inwards to source. He offered this: when you touch the deep self, you stop needing an enemy to feel real. If you remember who you are, you don't need an enemy to feel real. One of his most famous quotes, of course, is this: don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. It is my desire that we come alive. Coming alive is presence fully inhabited. When we come alive, we don't need to other to belong any longer. In coming alive, we understand infinite belonging, and we can expand that experience in our everyday lives. So on this Sunday, on what was supposed to be Pride Sunday, that just also happens to fall in the middle of Black History Month and rodeo weekend in Tucson. I just think about rodeo weekend because, having grown up here as a kid, we always got 2 days off. Yeah, we would get 2 days off. We didn't get President's Day or whatever the other holiday. We got 2 days off from school for rodeo. And we still do. Yeah. But on this Sunday, I really want to offer this as the unexpected initialism. When we stop othering and start practicing presence, life gets better together. That's what I invite you to carry with you today and evermore. Peace and blessings. You are magnificent. The life practice. If you are new to our community, I offer a life practice, which is a practical tool we can utilize in our life as we carry this message forward from this sanctuary into our everyday lives. So this week, practice one small everyday deed of kindness, purposefully and prayerfully. It seems simple, but endeavor to deepen into a greater awareness of what's actually unfolding as you practice that deed of kindness. This is about self-reflection, rooted in self-respect and self-esteem. That's the life practice this week.
Are you spiritual but not religious? Do you believe in unconditional love? Are you ready to create the life you know you deserve? Are you looking for an inclusive spiritual community? Do you want to discover how magnificent you really are? If you're looking for a spiritual path that's all about love, freedom of choice, and compassion,
we can't wait to meet you.
Unity of Tucson, Sundays at 9:15 a.m.
Need a moment of peace or inspiration? Call the Unity of Tucson prayer line for a comforting, uplifting prayer, available 24/7. Each month, we offer a new affirmative prayer to support you on your prayer journey. Call today and let the power of prayer uplift your spirit.